The following podcast may contain adult language and conversations revolving around situations not suitable for immature audiences. Spoilers and general political incorrectness can often be expected, so listener discretion is advised.
They must be destroyed on sight!
The following episode of They Must Be Destroyed on Sight is dedicated to the memory of the life and career of Sir Christopher Lee. In this episode, there will be two separate informal chats with my co-hosts Daniel and Paul, covering trivia, our general thoughts on Christopher Lee and his legacy in popular culture and cinema especially. Intercut will be soundbites and interview segments culled from various sources on YouTube, mostly surrounding his iconic character Dracula in the Hammer Dracula films. Rest in peace, Sir Christopher. Welcome to They Must Be Destroyed on Sight. It's not as happy an episode as usual, but I guess in a way it is. It's a celebration of an actor I deeply, deeply love, who just passed away, Sir Christopher Lee, 93 years old. So you can't really complain. I mean, the guy had a full life, 1922 to 2015. Great actor. And this is going to be sort of a little bit of a tribute show to him. Just give our thoughts on what we think of him and what his contribution to film was. Maybe throw a little bit of trivia in there, maybe talk about films of his that we really loved, performances that he did that we really loved. Anything you want to start off with, Daniel?
Sure. I mean, I know you're going to bring Paul into this and Cord later. I would love to have Paul here so that we could all kind of talk about it together. Mm-hmm. But sometimes recording doesn't let that happen. But for me, I think that I mostly know Christopher Lee from the later period of his career. For me, he is the iconic role for him is Saruman in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Where he is so, just mesmerizing. Even at that point, he was in his early 80s. When those were, I think, 80 years old when those were being filmed. He is just really sells that. I remember, for me, my kind of the moment I think of when I think of Christopher Lee, and this may sound really silly to you, is the moment where Ian McKellen as Gandalf kind of runs into him, and I forget the details of Middle Earth. I apologize, but like for that first scene that they have together, and they do this very brutal fight sequence where they're basically using magic and they're throwing each other against walls and that sort of thing. And for me, that kind of Lee brings a sort of a real grit to this. He brings one of the things about magic in that universe, or in Jackson's version of that universe, is that it is it is kind of brutal and horrible and very physical. And I think, he doesn't go for the big light show effects and that sort of thing. And I think he is so effective just in that very short sequence. It's showing just how powerful, because we kind of think of Gandalf in that moment as being like this kind of very powerful figure. And he's literally thrown around like a ragdoll by the forces of evil. And I think that some of that comes down to the filmmaking and the performance, or in the effects, but I think so much of it is just Christopher Lee's performance, and he's just so evil, but in that very understated way in a lot of senses. That for me, that's kind of the moment that I always think of when I think of Christopher Lee is Saruman. Honestly, of course, he's also Count Dooku, and he gets to have the fight scene with Yoda, which, but really for me, I'm always looking at Yoda in that scene. That's where that's where my scene. It's funny. He is like Ian McKellen in some way. He was this very erudite, very knowledgeable. I think he spoke like 6 languages or something like that. Mm-hmm. Had a very long career. and did a lot of great performances in kind of crappy movies, you know.
Yeah.
But late in his career, really kind of was embraced by the kind of by geek properties, by Saruman. I mean, Lee was both Saruman and Count Dooku, and he was in both of these giant franchises very, very late in his career, which I think speaks to his, I mean, just how respected and how good he was, and was still acting up to the, I mean, literally, I mean, I think the last weeks of his life, he was still.
He had just signed on for something else, some other project before he died. So
yeah, which is the other kind of big thing that I think of when I think of Christopher Lee. Is the Billy Wilder film from the early 70s, the Private Life of Sherlock Holmes. This is the one where he also played Sherlock Holmes in some other films, but he played Mycroft Holmes.
Yes.
Sherlock's older brother. And I think that's an underseen film, and I think Lee is kind of pivotal to that film because he ultimately drives most of the plot.
Yeah.
To be quite honest with you. Have you seen that film?
I have seen that film, yeah.
I don't own the DVD, but I have I got the DVD through rental.
I'm a big fucking Holmes freak. Like, I watch everything Sherlock Holmes pretty much.
Yeah. I went through a Billy Wilder kick for a while, so I was watching. I mean, I watched it as a Billy Wilder thing as much as anything. I have not seen Lee play Sherlock Holmes. I mean, would you like to speak to that? Or
he did. He looks like Sherlock Holmes. Like, he looks like Sherlock Holmes, like, right out of the pages if you read the stories. He did a great job, but the same thing you could say about Peter Cushing, and personally, Peter Cushing is sort of my favorite big screen Sherlock Holmes. And if you want to go for my favorite overall, it's what's his face who did the TV version that you see on PBS all the time and stuff. I can't think of his name right now. I should know it. I'm actually kind of kicking myself right now that I don't remember it. But
well, in the last episode, I admitted I'd never seen The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, so I think we'll forgive you.
Yeah, okay. But Christopher Lee did Sherlock Holmes a couple times. I think he did a couple times on the big screen. He did at least one on a TV movie. He also was in the Hammer adaptation of Hounds of the Baskervilles as, I guess, Henry Baskerville, which was sort of a atypical performance for him. And he's also, of course, he played Mycroft and he's played Sherlock Holmes. The Hound of the Baskervilles one, he was opposite Peter Cushing as Sherlock Holmes in that one. Yeah, he did a lot of Holmes stuff. I think you bring up a good point. Like you say, for you, it's more Saruman that you identify him with. He had such a long career that different generations are basically going to know him for different roles.
Absolutely.
He's more iconic to them in a certain role. His career resurgence sort of came through his collaborations with Tim Burton. Like, he did 5 different Tim Burton projects, I believe. I think starting with Sleepy Hollow, I think, was the first one.
Yeah, he was in Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah, and that sort of brought him back. And Sleepy Hollow was a sort of a love letter to Hammer Films. And, his career sort of went down a little bit, or sort of slowed down a little bit through the 80s and some of the 90s. He wasn't doing quite as much stuff. But yeah, very noted for playing villains. Like you said, this is Saruman, really, really good. It was just something that seemed to come natural from him to play the bad guy. His most iconic role is still Count Dracula, and for me, he is my Dracula. He's the one whenever I think of Dracula, I look to him. Like, he is my Count Dracula. But he didn't just do that. Like, I'll just go through here. Like, when he started, he wasn't really known for horror. It wasn't until about 1957 when he did The Curse of Frankenstein, where he played Frankenstein's monster for Hammer Films, that he really started doing a lot of horror films. He did, for me, one of the best interpretations of the Frankenstein monster, a very physical role. He didn't have any lines, it was just grunts and growls. But even then, you could see just the quality of his acting, like a very great physical actor. I'd say the same thing about Peter Cushing as well. They both had that sort of quality to them. You just look at his physical acting in The Curse of Frankenstein. Then you look in a film later on, The Mummy in 1959 from Hammer Films. There are some scenes in that where he's basically just acting with his eyes, and he does so much in those films, just acting with his eyes, that is so effective. It's just really amazing.
He comes from that background of the Shakespearean trained British actor, like that old school. They say once you can play Shakespeare, you can play anything. And I think that's a key point in sort of that classical training. I'm not saying that, modern actors who don't have that training or, it's a different kind of training that actors get today. But I think that, that ability, that versatility to either be this kind of monstrous, like kind of hulking figure. I mean, Christopher Lee was in life, I think he was like 6'2" or 6'3" or something. I mean, he was
6'5".
6'5". Okay, so even taller than that. No, he was a very physically imposing figure in real life, and had a. If you read a lot of the articles that have been posted lately, have been kind of talking about his history in World War II. He was also in real life, he was a war hero. Yeah, working for
Secret Service, wasn't it?
Secret Service. Yeah. No, I mean, and basically a real life Inglourious Bastards kind of figure. I mean, I don't know how much of that is still classified, honestly, but if half of what you hear is true, I mean, this group was definitely a very group of fucking badasses. Not to put too fine a point on it, but I mean, you look at that training and you look at that Shakespearean cadence. And you see, I mean, and he did play Shakespeare. I'm looking through his list of roles here, and I mean, he did some Shakespeare in his time.
He did Hamlet and stuff.
And he definitely brought that to even the smallest film, even the one of the things, and I'm kind of astonished that he never did any Doctor Who. It's sort of one of those things you would think that at some point in the 26-year history of that British TV show that he would have been in it at some point, because like every British actor was in it at some point. For Christopher Lee,
even Peter Cushing did the Amicus film adaptations of Doctor Who.
The two Doctor Who and the Daleks, and
Invasion Earth.
Yeah, Invasion 2150. That's what it's called. No, I mean, and so it is kind of one of those just kind of looking at it. But I guess he moved in different circles. I guess he was doing kind of I guess if he's already doing the Hammer horror films, he doesn't need to do the kind of rip-off versions that Doctor Who was doing in the early 70s,
Yeah, well, he was very picky in a way for his roles. I mean, so if he read a script and he thought it was trash, he wasn't going to do it. Not that I'm saying like he was reading Doctor Who scripts and thinking they were trash.
Oh no, not at all. You also don't see a lot of TV on his resume.
No.
At least not. I mean, you do. I guess I'm looking at the list now, but certainly in that kind of period that I think he would have been. He doesn't do a lot of TV in the like kind of mid '60s to early '70s. Yeah. So that may be, that would kind of been when he really would have fit into the program really well. So I guess that might have been. I mean, he just wasn't doing TV during that period. That would make sense. If he was doing big screen roles, I mean, certainly in the '70s. I mean, up until the '90s, to be quite honest with you, until very recently. There really was this kind of different pecking order. You were either doing TV or you were doing movies. And if you had this kind of big screen career, going and doing TV was kind of, well, that's trash. You don't want to do that. You're a TV actor. That's a much less prestigious place to be. So it does sort of make sense from a sociological point of view. It's just sort of one of those kind of amazing things where it's like, well, surely he did a Doctor Who. No, he didn't.
Yeah, it was kind of weird that he never did that. We'll just go through a couple facts here about him. I mean, he was born into sort of semi-royalty almost. His mother was an Italian contessa, apparently descended from Emperor Charlemagne in the Holy Roman Empire. So it's kind of interesting.
Well, who isn't really?
He actually met the assassins of the Russian monk Rasputin, and he actually played him very effectively in an adaptation of Rasputin, the Mad Monk, in 1966.
The woman was sick. I healed her.
Healed her? How, with potions?
With these.
Was your wife possessed of the devil? Did he exorcise her, pray over her?
No, I touched her with these. It's true, Father.
God would never bless someone so steeped in sin with such a gift. It must come from
the devil. Who knows? I only know I have this power. I have always had it. I can feel it burning within me, driving me on. It is here inside me. It is in my hands. And I warn you all, that I, Grigory Efimovich Rasputin, intend to use it. The power is mine, and I shall use it as I please.
Which is actually one of his best roles, I think. He was step cousin to Ian Fleming, creator of James Bond, and Ian Fleming actually sort of envisioned Christopher Lee as the guy he'd want to play Bond in the films, but it never ended up happening. He ended up playing Scaramanga, but very good because he was essentially basically the other side of the coin to James Bond, where James Bond was this highly skilled professional patriot. Scaramanga was a mercenary, but very much the equal to Bond in many ways. So it was kind of a nice dynamic in that film.
邦先生同佢超能，
超能同埋落個人。
邦先生咧一於捉到你死人，於係死人噶啦。
豈有此理！你個飯桶。
What do they teach in that school? Ballet dancing?
I find nothing remotely amusing about Mr. Bond's escape.
You underestimated him.
Even my influence doesn't extend into the British Secret Service. I shall lie low too. I don't intend to jeopardize a project in which I've invested half my fortune when it's ready to yield billions.
And where will you hide out?
That does not concern you. Take this. Return it to the plant and don't leave there without my permission. May I remind you that you work for me. I took you on as a junior partner to be an occasional convenience, nothing more. I did not hire you to interfere in my affairs. Is that clearly understood?
Oh, yes, very clearly.
I now regret having even considered employing your services, but that is beside the point. Bond doesn't know you're in Bangkok. He's never seen you, but he knows me. That's the problem.
There's no problem.
What happened?
Mr. Fatt has just resigned. I'm the new chairman of the board. He always did like that mausoleum. Put him in it.
One thing I would mention, just looking through the list of titles, he was in 1941, the Steven Spielberg comedy, which almost ruined Spielberg's career. I don't remember him in that, but I haven't seen that film in about 20 years.
No, I can't remember him in it either.
Since we're doing the sex comedy series, I would like to mention he did do an actual sex comedy. In 1987, he did a movie called Jocks, which yes. I'm almost tempted to say we should include that in our series as a tribute to the late Christopher Lee.
We could mention I do have Jocks on DVD here somewhere.
So, I was looking through the list and going, wait a minute, he's in that? Really? That's awesome. He was also in Gremlins 2, The New Batch.
Yes, and he was really good in that too.
He was really good in that. I think a lot of people, at least in my kind of Twitter feed, Facebook feed, people remember him as Death in the Discworld movie from 1996.
No, I've never seen that one.
Yeah, I haven't either. It's a kind of a British production. It's the Terry Pratchett series. Death is if you've read any of those books, or even if you haven't, but you have familiarity with the fans, the Death character is a very pivotal one in that series. And I think I saw some people kind of joking that the horrifying Death character from Discworld would come for Christopher Lee, but then be scared away from Christopher Lee's actual self. Would be too scared to actually harvest him, which I think is funny. He's also in the Golden Compass. I don't know. It's just there's so much stuff. I'm looking through his list. It's again one of those, we've talked about it before. One of those working actors who is in a little bit of everything and was just such a part of cinema for so long. I mean, its earliest film was 1948.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So
I mean, you're literally talking about. I mean, almost. Well, God. I mean, you're talking about a 60-year career.
Yeah,
and you're talking about someone who was a working actor who was in films for that long. It's almost hard to imagine that you could sum it up in one role or even just a few roles. Yeah. No, I also remember, again, going back to the Lord of the Rings thing, that in some of the documentary features, Peter Jackson would talk about how Christopher Lee knew the Lord of the Rings books so well that he became a kind of de facto fact checker on the set, or kind of, that he was the guy who they would go to and is this right? Is this the way this should be?
From what I hear, he's actually kind of critical to some ways that he was depicted, like in some of the cut scenes and stuff in some of those films, like I think a revolving around his death that they filmed in the film, where it was almost, I think it was a tribute to his role in Dracula, where he falls off his tower and gets stabbed right to the heart or whatever on like some spike or something down in the ground.
Yeah, no, that is kind of that's about the point in the films where they make kind of the most radical departures from the structure of the book. So apparently Christopher Lee was said to have read the Lord of the Rings trilogy once a year, every year from the year they were published. Like, he was that big of a Lord of the Rings fan. That he reread them every year for 60 years or something like that, which is kind of amazing.
Some interesting little trivia things on him. Essentially, you hear about like 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. Apparently, Christopher Lee was actually recognized as being the most connected actor in the world in 2008 by Guinness Book of World Records. He says he connects to virtually any actor in about 2.59 steps, beating Bacon.
Yeah, in fact, I think I remember that analysis, and Kevin Bacon is actually not even that. Like, he's kind of middle of the road as far as that goes. Like, Kevin Bacon's kind of the thing that it's named after, but he's actually not all that well connected.
Yeah, he's the pop culture connection is what he is. Yeah, he actually turned down Donald Pleasance's role of Sam Loomis in Halloween, and apparently that's something he regretted quite a bit.
I mean, it's hard to imagine Halloween being any more iconic of a picture.
It's weird. I don't know if I'd buy him in the role compared to Donald Pleasance's portrayal, because Donald Pleasance plays Sam Loomis as this like really desperate, obsessive, almost bordering on insane character. I don't know if as much range as Lee has, I don't know if I would necessarily buy him as much. He doesn't have that air of him when you look at him. Like, he's not this frumpy, stocky guy in a trench coat. He'd be much more authoritarian and I guess respectable, even. Like,
it definitely would have changed that film. I mean, dramatically. I mean, and that is one of those where you realize what a big change casting could make. If you imagine Christopher Lee in that, the whole film would have to change around him. Like, he would kind of walk in, he'd be in the coat, but he'd be this kind of imposing, all foreshadowing, and the kind of gravelly voice, and this very setting up some of the horror that you're going to have, as opposed to Pleasance, who plays it in a much more frantic, obsessive way. Anyway, that's just repeating what you just said. So.
I didn't want to terrify people, although I think I probably did. I've never set out in a film, any film, to terrify people, genuinely terrify them. You have to make it believable, but it doesn't have to be reality. You have to be truthful in your performance, but the character doesn't have to be. You're looking at a fairy story. It can't happen. Of course, nobody believed that. You see, that such was the power, and still is, the power of the screen.
If you have any sort of final thoughts you want to put in there, Daniel, and
I think whenever someone like this dies, I think there is this impulse to lionize them, and to kind of forget the bad stuff and only remember. The problem with Christopher Lee is that it's almost it's hard to find the bad stuff. Really, there were maybe some bad films. I'm sure in a list.
Although honestly, very few for him.
But not many. And that's a mark of his performance, but also his ability to choose roles. It's hard to imagine an actor who is more iconic for so long than Christopher Lee, and who worked so late in his life. I mean, and then had the career resurgence in his 80s, as this frankly, is sort of an action hero, with Saruman and Dooku. I mean, those are not, kind of old man sitting in a wheelchair kind of roles. Those are very, kind of active roles. I guess my thought I was thinking about it is when you were talking is, you think about somebody who was maybe 6 or 7 years old when they saw, episode 1 or episode 2 and, fell in love with Dooku in those movies, who will themselves live to be 80 or 90 years old. And then you stretch that back all the way back to Christopher Lee's earliest performances in the 40s, and you've literally got a line of kind of memories of an actor that stretch almost 120 years, 130 years, which is, people will be talking about Christopher Lee for centuries. I mean, I think that's a fair, as long as film is a medium that people study, I think that people will talk about Christopher Lee to some degree or another. I think for me, the big thing is I need to sit down and watch some of these Hammer horror films that I haven't seen. So, and if that's the legacy that Christopher Lee's death has for me, then I think that's a good legacy.
Yeah, basically the last of his generation as far as iconic sort of, not just actors, but horror actors go. He's basically it's it. Like Peter Cushing's dead, Vincent Price is dead, Donald Pleasance is dead. He's the last of that really. I guess you call it like the silver age of classic Hollywood horror. He's basically the last one, and he's gone. So it's something notable and something people should remember. Thanks very much, Daniel, for joining me with this one. And you want to plug your podcast and anything else that's going on with you?
I think I did already kind of plug it, but my wife and I do a Doctor Who podcast. So if you do want to listen to us talk about some of the ripoffs of Christopher Lee's films, the kind of horror films, we have done a little bit of that, especially when we're talking about the Pertwee years. But if you are a Doctor Who fan and you're not listening to my podcast, my other podcast I do with my wife, and you're a fan of Doctor Who and you actually like me on this podcast, which I think many of our fans may not like me so much on this podcast, but if you are a fan of me, you should check me out at oispaceman.libsyn.com. That's oispaceman.libsyn.com.
And you should like Daniel because he's really fuzzable. He's really fuzzable. I'm drunk now.
Fuckable. Fuckable is what you're trying to say.
No, I was going to say fuzzy and likable. Probably fuckable as well.
Yeah, no. One day you'll find out. One day.
All right, guys. Thanks very much for listening. And switch over to Paul here. All right.
And then you can have a real conversation about Christopher Lee instead of my ramblings. So awesome. Good for the listeners. Good for you.
In these two short interview segments, Christopher Lee talks about the tribute that he paid to Bela Lugosi, as well as the difficulties revolving around making the Dracula films, how he felt that they compared to the source material, and his overall thoughts on why he did so many sequels when he often detested the material that was given him to work with.
This ring is a copy of a similar ring worn by a Central European actor. His name was Bela Lugosi. Now that's the correct way of pronouncing it. But that was probably a little bit too much for people to take. And so he became immortalized under the name of Bela Lugosi. He made his name, as indeed did I, in the playing of a certain rather strange Transylvanian nobleman. Might interest you to know that Transylvania still exists, and I've been there. And the name of that nobleman, of course, immortalized in one book and known throughout the world now, was quite simply the word Dracula. I wore this ring. I can't remember how many pictures I actually wore it in when I played that part, but I certainly did wear it in some, as a tribute to Lugosi. So I wore this ring. The picture that we are referring to, that I'm talking about now, in a more particular sense, is called Dracula, Prince of Darkness, which was the second Dracula picture that I was in. And interestingly enough, there was a gap of something like 7 years between the first one and the second one, because I think the first one was made in 1957 or 8, and the second one certainly was made in 1965. People all over the world who've seen that film have asked me why I didn't speak in it. I didn't say a word throughout the entire film. The answer is very simple. I read the script, and the lines were literally unsayable. They were not Bram Stoker. This was a great fight I used to have over the years with Hammer. I kept on saying, why don't you use Stoker's words, Stoker's dialogue, if you like? No. So somebody used to write up lines like, I am the apocalypse, and beyond belief. So I said, I'm sorry, I'm not saying these lines. You know, you get a terrific laugh, which I'm quite convinced we would have done.
Oh yeah, and then the guy in the back. On this Bram Stoker's birthday, I'd like to ask you about Count Dracula, because my...
Who?
Count Dracula. Well, you've played 8 times. You've been critical over the years of the...
I have.
Of the... what has been left out of Stoker's novel in the films.
Everything.
What I wanted to ask you was, when you performed, or when you played Dracula for Hammer, what was the quality in Stoker's character that you most wished to convey?
What did I want to put into the character, do you mean?
Yes.
Well, the first thing was that I wanted to play Stoker's character. I did make a rather indifferent film in Spain called Count Dracula, in which I was Stoker's Dracula, an old man with white hair getting younger, and dressed, I quote the book, entirely in black from head to foot, without a single speck of colour. That's Stoker. When I did the first one, I read the book, of course, and it wasn't remotely like the book, really. But, of course, the result was amazing, because I really wasn't very well known, either by name or face. And, it became world famous. I tried to bring out the aspects of the character that Stoker had written. One thing to me is very important. If you're playing somebody that the audience regards as, let's say, evil or whatever, try to do something they don't expect. Something which surprises the audience. Never do something 100%. I mean, yes, you play the part 100%, but try and put something in somewhere which surprises people. It appears, which was not what I intended, that I became a sort of sexual image. Well, those days are long gone, I can assure you. But everybody commented on that, and obviously enough, it was not my intention. I simply did what was in the script. Instinct, I suppose, as much as anything else. That was in 1957, I think it was made. Then they did another one after 8 years, Prince of Darkness, which I didn't say a word because I'd read the script and I refused to say any of the lines. That's not a secret, it's in my book, which you can still get. It's called Lord of Misrule, and it's the second version of the book. And I didn't say anything. Didn't seem to make much difference, really. Then the trouble started. This is also in my book, so I'm not saying this for the first time. I got another script from my agent, third one, and I read it and I said, I'm not going to do this. said, why not? I said, it's terrible. I mean, the dialogue is not good. The character isn't Stoker's character at all. I'm just standing there in a corner and occasionally doing something, for someone, but not much more. I said, I don't want to do it. And my agent was absolutely horrified because Peter Cushing was also with him. And if I'd refused, that would have been the end of that. This happened with the third film and the fourth film and the fifth film. I turned them all down. Said no. And I got hysterical telephone calls from Hammer saying, what's this I hear about you saying you won't do this? It's happened 3 times, 3 films. I said, no, I'm not going to do it. I don't have to. I don't want to. You've got to. You've got to. You have to. You must. And I said, why? They said, because we've already sold it to the Americans with you in the part. Which annoyed me a bit. And then, which I'll never forget, think of the people you put out of work if you don't do it. Well, that's a dreadful thing to say to somebody. So I can truthfully say the only reason I made 3, 4, and 5, or whatever it was because all the crew were my friends. It was like a family. It really was. And I wasn't going to put them out of work. I couldn't. So that's a story a lot of people don't know, but I can assure you it's the truth.
Look at Mr. Lee, 3, 4, 5. Look at him jive, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. Oh, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. Oh, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. Oh, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. I met my sweetie, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. His name is Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. I met my sweetie, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. His name is Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. Well, he's the handsomest sweetie that you ever did see. My heart is aching, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee, for you, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. My heart is aching for you, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. 'Cause I love you so, and I never let you go. Oh, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. Oh, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. Oh, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. Oh, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. Here comes Mr. Lee. He's come for me. Here comes Mr. Lee. He's my little boy. Let's jump for joy. Come on, Mr. Lee, and do your stuff. Come on, Mr. Lee, and do your stuff. 'Cause you're gonna be mine till all time. 1, 2, 3. Look at Mr. Lee, 3, 4, 5. Look at him jive. 1, 2, 3. Look at Mr. Lee, 3, 4, 5. Look at him jive, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. Oh, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. Oh, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. Oh, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. Oh, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. Oh, Mr. Lee,
Okay, well, I'm back with Paul, P.A. Brunus, our other co-host, and we're going to be talking about Christopher Lee. I'm glad I had Paul on here so we can talk a little bit more, I guess, in detail about Christopher Lee's horror film to some degree. And I think when we started, I'll just ask you, Paul, what's your general opinion of Christopher Lee, and what do you basically what do you think of him overall as far as his contribution to film and horror film in general?
Well, Christopher Lee to me is just utter class. Everything is in. He had a quote that kind of sums up my thought about him. He said, "From time to time, you'll make bad films. The trick is not being bad in them." And that's basically what I think about Christopher Lee. He always comes in, even in the shittiest films he's been in, has given them 110% every time.
Mm-hmm.
And the majority of films that he's in, I like. I know sometimes, obviously, you can't please everybody, but I really like the films that he's been in. There's some films that he's got so many films that you can't. It's like Vincent Price. It's hard to. John Carradine, Vincent Price. I mean, if you look at the four classics: Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, Vincent Price, John Carradine. If you go through those, you're gonna have a lifetime worth of movies to watch.
Yeah.
Just with those four guys, it's amazing. So, but from what I've watched, he really comes in, he really steals a role too. The thing that I like about him is he's a consummate professional, but he doesn't step on everybody when he comes in.
Yeah.
I never felt his presence overshadowed the movie, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, and you look at him and you look at like Peter Cushing and his contemporaries. I honestly think for Christopher Lee, like, I don't think he's done a lot of like really bad movies, honestly. Like, I could say for Peter Cushing, he's been in like several like really bad movies in his career. Like, I'm not saying he did bad performances or anything like that, but for Christopher Lee, he seemed like he was a bit more selective in what he chose to act in, and it felt like a lot of his stuff was just slightly a little bit more above a lot of guys as far as his contemporaries go.
Well, as far as the like shit flicks, stuff like that, I mean, John Carradine pretty much took care of all the shit flicks.
Yeah, well, John Carradine. I mean, I love John Carradine, but I mean, he really did pick a lot of really bad
Astro Zombies
films. Yeah, there.
And he was so good in that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing. Like, these guys are good in anything they pretty much pick, but Christopher Lee picked really good roles in generally really good films for the most part. Like,
my wife's worst Christopher Lee film, in her opinion, is Howling 2.
Oh, really?
And I do enjoy that film quite a bit, and she can't stand it.
Well, I actually really love that film. Like,
it has its own little vibe to it, and I don't ever try to compare it to the first one.
Oh, yeah,
it's got Christopher Lee being epic, and it's got Sybil Danning's tits left and right. And it's got Babel singing a beautiful fucking 80s song, and I just like it. No matter how cheesy and stupid it is, it gets better and better.
No, it really works. I mean, you see Christopher Lee's a fucking werewolf hunter. He's wearing those goddamn fucking funky 80s glasses.
Yeah.
And that's the only classic monster he never played. He never played a werewolf. He played Dracula. He played Frankenstein's monster. He played the Mummy. Well, I guess also
the only one that has the credit, I think, of playing all the monsters is Lon Chaney Jr.
Yeah, he never played the Gill Man or the werewolf, but still, for me personally, he's my favorite Frankenstein's monster. When I saw the Hammer version of
the Curse of Frankenstein.
Yeah, I love that, man. Like, he was so more believable to me than any other Frankenstein's monsters I had ever seen. Like, he felt like a reanimated corpse. He had no lines in that film. It was all grunts and groans and shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was all method acting through silence, and it wasn't over the top though. If you look now, obviously Boris Karloff's Frankenstein is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
The monster from Frankenstein is amazing, but they didn't try to. They took it as a literary license and made their own. They didn't try to just make another Boris Karloff monster.
Yeah,
I like that, and they didn't go overboard. As you see, like 3 or 4 years later, when Frankenstein and the Monster of Hell came out, you see the overblown Frankenstein's monster. But he had a really interesting kind of acting, and there's a lot of physical stuff in the films too that I don't think he shied away from. I think those guys were pretty much let's do it kind of mentality.
And I mean, he took that sort of physical method acting. I mean, he did Frankenstein's monster, and then later on he did the Mummy. His version of the Mummy, I think it's the best version for me personally. Mm-hmm. I mean, just the acting he does of his eyes, it is really fucking good. Like he projects sort of a profound sadness in his character that I did not see in any other interpretation of the Mummy, whether it's classic or modern.
The Christopher Lee make of the Mummy is a little bit more meat in it, and it goes a little bit faster than the original Mummy too. So
that's
you
right.
You can stay a little bit more attached to it longer without having to worry about getting bored.
Yeah.
Out of all of them, the Mummy's the strangest and most. Here's the sad thing: is like the Mummy has this lineage behind it and this supernatural feel and the curses and all this stuff, but out of all the Mummy, out of all the creatures, it's the most boring. It's weird.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's a hard character to make like really pop out on the screen, and that's the thing about the Hammer version with Christopher Lee. When I watched that, I felt like, okay, this is the first time I found the Mummy really interesting. Like, I seen Boris Karloff do it and shit. It's really good, but when Christopher Lee did it, just the acting that guy does was his fucking eyes. Like, because he doesn't get to say shit. Like, he doesn't get to say anything. All his acting is physical, and he does it with his fucking eyes. And I'm like, okay, I get his character. I get what he's thinking, what he's feeling. And he projects that very well in the film. And the film overall is really good, too.
The projection of emotion and the intensity of Christopher Lee's face, his body structures and his eyes, I mean, made him perfect for Dracula.
Yeah.
My wife, except for another thing for my wife, we were just talking about it, except for Radu, her favorite's Radu subspecies, but one of our tops is Christopher Lee as far as Draculas go.
Well, he's my Dracula. I appreciate his interpretation. I know his interpretation from the Hammer films is not 100% in par with the actual Bram Stoker's version, but I don't give a fuck about that because I really love the way he presented himself in it. Very elemental, very animalistic. Part of that is because as the films progressed, he did not like the scripts. He did not like the lines.
Yeah, I remember, I'm not saying this shit.
Yeah, exactly. He refused to read a lot of the lines in these films. It was all up to his physical acting to project and present Dracula as a threatening force, and he did it in spades. He was really great at it. You go to Taste the Blood of Dracula, which is actually my favorite film from the Hammer Dracula series. That was a film he was not even supposed to be in. He only was brought back into it in the last moment because people were like Hammer and people were saying, we got to bring it back because everyone loves you and they want you in Dracula's role and shit like that.
Yeah.
So okay, I'll do it.
The original Draculas that he did was actually that Hammer did was what Kiss of Dracula or something, Kiss of the Vampire, and that didn't have Christopher Lee in it at all. It was more of just a foppish, blonde Englishman, you know what I mean? And didn't have the presence that like a horror of Dracula had. Yeah, I mean his when he came up, the first thing he said, they have destroyed my minion.
They
have destroyed my servant. They will be destroyed.
I was like, oh crap, he's mad.
and that I think that was the best film in the series. Just because the subtext was the hypocrisy of Victorian values and morals. Because you had all these Victorian gentlemen trying to explore Satanism and stuff like that, even though they
the sexual side of fetish and things, even though they're trying to tell everybody, be nice and say your prayers and only be good. And then I'm going to go to the whorehouse. I'll see you later.
Yeah. Exactly. And the original script for the film did not have Dracula in it. It just had the guy who played Dracula's sort of disciple or whatever. He was supposed to have a bigger part in the film. He was supposed to be the bad guy in the film, but
wasn't his last name Alucard or something like that? They had some kind of name in there.
I think Alucard was the guy in Dracula AD 1972, I think.
Yeah, that's my wife's favorite.
I think he was Johnny Alucard or something in that one.
My wife's favorite, I talked to her about this. It's Dracula 1972, and then we both love Satanic Rites of Dracula, also known as the Vampire Brides of Dracula, I think.
Yeah, and I think those films are unfairly shit upon.
And we can get these films in the dollar bins.
Yeah.
And they're epic films.
I love them. I think they're unfairly crapped upon. The Dracula series for Hammer does not follow really any sort of
activity.
It really doesn't.
There is a little bit of here, like I think it was like a Prince of Darkness to Scars in that area. You'll see the one cross where he was stabbed through, and then they move it and do something else, and he comes back. But like, really, that's the only connectivity that it actually has.
Yeah, I think for me it was Dracula Has Risen from His Grave, and that one directly transferred to Taste of Blood of Dracula because
is that the one with the dust, because he collects all the dust in the ring.
Yes, yeah,
because at that one everything blows away.
Mm-hmm.
See the ring at the end.
Yeah.
That one is good. I think the problem is I don't think a lot of people appreciate what Hammer did. Hammer is probably one of the best film companies back in the day. The music, the atmosphere, everything they did was on a dime, and it was epic. It wasn't cheesy sound effects. The only thing cheesy about a Hammer film was the bats. That was the cheesiest thing about Hammer film.
Oh shit! What was that? Was that Satanic Rites of Dracula that had that really bad effect in it? I think.
The best bad effect was Scars of Dracula, where it had the
Scars.
People,
yes,
it had the people in the big room, and then he's just tornado of bats coming through everywhere and just attacking, and it's just like they're just throwing rubber bats at people, basically. There you go, attack!
Yeah, it was Scars of Dracula, because that was the second one in the series. You had Horror of Dracula, which was the first one, which is also known just as Dracula.
Yeah,
and
Dracula Has Risen from His Grave.
Yeah, so I think Scars was the second one, and it did not have Christopher Lee. I don't remember if Peter Cushing was in that one or not. I don't think he was.
The one that I know that doesn't have Christopher Lee in it was Kiss of the Vampire. Didn't have Christopher Lee in it. And I call it the Asian titty film, which is The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires.
Yeah.
The Seven Brothers Meet Dracula.
And that was a collaboration between Hammer and Shaw Films.
And I do love Shaw Films quite a bit, too. My favorite part is it's like Asian tits. Oh, Fu Manchu automatically becomes Dracula, and he falls over and dies. Best part of that was the Asian tits and Peter Cushing.
Yeah, and that one, like, they tried hard to make a Dracula who looked like Christopher Lee as well. Like, they really tried hard, but,
Yeah, but that was like, it was like an Italian waiter. That's what he looked like to me. My thing about, I think this, too, that really made the Dracula films the best for me was you had the antagonist and the protagonist. Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee is like beer and meat. They just go together perfectly. And that's the thing is, they work so well together that every film, even the Sherlock Holmes films, like the Hound of Baskervilles, where they're the protagonists. They're not the bad guys the whole time, but they work so well together. Things like that, or Nothing But the Night, where basically they're screwed. They're actually getting killed. They're the good guys. They're actually getting screwed over. He plays a perfectly paranoid, scared father in The House that Dripped Blood, where his daughter was a witch, and he plays this role where he feels like the bad guy all the time. And it's not that he's stereotyped; he's leading people in the wrong direction purposely.
Yeah,
and that's the thing is because you've seen stuff where he's more like the helpful doctor, like the Oblong Box, or something that is just a weird role that he plays that you think he's nothing, and that would be like then the screaming starts, or Scream and Scream Again, where he plays the acid bath doctor. I mean,
yeah.
And there's a plethora of roles that he plays that they're not typecast. I don't think they're typecast.
No, Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, like, they played off each other so well. They were best friends. There was a point where Peter Cushing, his wife died. He did not want to act anymore. And Christopher Lee actually sort of basically got him back into acting. I mean, that was before Star Wars. That was before Peter Cushing really sort of got like that big iconic role and all that stuff. Like his career was pretty much done as far as he was
concerned. This was like more like the Amicus days.
Yeah, exactly. And they had good roles where they were friends as well. I mean, well, sort of rivals, but friends. Like take a film like Horror Express, where they were rivals in science, but they came together to win the day. A great line in that film. The whole movie's about a body jumping alien who is and
these motherfucking aliens on this motherfucking train.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And the inspector's like, you might be the fucking alien. Monsters? We're British. We can't be monsters.
What are you talking about? This is ridiculous.
The animal that you shot was only the host. And when that animal died, the alien intelligence transferred somehow to another host. It's alive in someone on this train.
You're a very good detective. You've discovered everything except who is now the host.
And that's our next step.
Thought this might come in handy.
Oh, good idea.
Two of you together, that's fine. But what if one of you is the monster?
Monster? We're British, you know.
And it's just so good. Like, both of them were so well-trained actors. Like, they had their sort of background in Shakespearean acting and stuff like that. And they could do anything together. Like, they just could project anything. They could do anything. They could do any character. They worked really good in The Skull, where it was one of the rare Christopher Lee roles where he was a good guy. And that's the thing, like, Christopher Lee could do a good guy. Like, he really could. He could do a good guy really well, but he was typecast as sort of a villain. Part of it was the fact that he was 6'5". A lot of his contemporaries were not even anywhere near that fucking tall. And for some reason, people sort of felt that he was...
No, they're more imposing.
People sort of felt he was foreign-looking.
You foreign-looking bastard.
Yeah. That was kind of a thing with him. Like, he did not get leading roles as a hero or anything like that because he looked more foreign to a lot of people. So you saw him get roles like later on as like Scaramanga in the Man with the Golden Gun.
Man with the Golden Gun.
Yeah, and in that one he plays a Cuban. And
three-nippled Cuban.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. He got those sort of villain roles because it was like he's so tall and imposing. And yeah, it just really that was the way his career went.
And he also played in like as Peter Cushing? Didn't he also play in the Star Wars movies?
He was in the later Star Wars movies, the prequels. He was Count Dooku in those ones. Those films kind of suck ass, but he was really good in them. It's the same feeling you get for the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit films. Like, he's really fucking great in those films.
I love the Hobbit films and all the Tolkien films. I love the fact that he was the only person that in the films ever that met him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he
was a huge Tolkien fan. And I like that he was there, especially during, I don't know about the Hobbit so much, but definitely the Lord of the Rings, going, that's not right.
Yeah.
He'll stand like, nope, that's wrong. Do that again. That's not right. You rewrite this.
He was a valued critic of those films by Peter Jackson.
He actually had copies of the book signed by Tolkien as well. Actually sat down and talked to Tolkien. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that. And he plays a perfect character in the movie. Saruman, he played it brilliantly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, he plays a essentially, like, and I was talking to Daniel about this when we were talking about Saruman. I mean, he's a character that essentially he's more powerful than Gandalf. Like, he is the head.
He's white, so he's a high level.
Yeah, he's the head of that order. The only reason that he ends up becoming, getting defeated is because he's corrupted. Like, he's he's a good person who is eventually corrupted and loses his way, and that's the only reason he gets defeated or whatever.
Dies on a wheel well. I just bought the Lord of the Rings cartoon soundtrack on vinyl.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there you go.
The original cartoon from like the 70s or whatever?
Yeah, I bought that one. I like that. Christopher Lee is one of those ones that he can do anything, basically. I mean, a lot of people don't know he was in the metal music. He's done a lot of parts for Rhapsody on Fire, and he's been on Broadway. I mean, he's done, I don't know, he's operatic singing. He's done spoken word. He's done, I don't know what he hasn't done. Honestly.
Yeah. No, I mean, the guy was 93 years old.
He left more of a full life than almost anybody out there. But at the same time, we all feel like he shouldn't have went, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, the guy was working up to his death. Before he died, he signed on to a new project. I mean, that was what he was doing. Like, he was just a guy who was always doing something. Like, you mentioned his metal stuff. In his later years, he was doing that. Like, he was doing metal. Like, I think he did, what 2 or 3 metal albums?
3.
Yeah. And, I mean, they were not traditionally metal in the way you...
Well, it's heavy power metal stuff. It's Rhapsody from Italy. And he would go on tour with them and actually come out and read from excerpts and then do spoken word stuff and do baritone behind the things.
Mm-hmm.
That's epic.
Yeah, and it was, and I enjoyed it. Like, I've seen some of the videos, and I thought it was fucking cool. I liked it. I mean, he was like doing this like Charlemagne kind of stuff. It did not feel cheap or silly or anything like that. It was like, okay, I actually kind of respect this. This is really, really cool. You get the feeling that he never did anything that he thought was necessarily all that much beneath him. He had a real standard that he lived up to as far as his acting goes.
Well, you have to remember that the best film he ever did was Gremlins 2.
Actually, he did a great job in that film.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Get you diseases. Pestilence.
Christopher Lee got sort of a career resurgence with Tim Burton.
He did Corpse Bride.
Mm-hmm. He did 5 projects with Tim Burton. I mean, I think the first one he did was Sleepy Hollow. I think that was the first one, and it was just a bit part. He was a judge.
He was the judge, yeah.
Yeah, and that whole film was a homage to Hammer sort of films, anyway. And that sort of made him relevant again. Like this is a guy who was fucking relevant in his 80s and 90s to a modern audience, which is fucking unheard of for the most part for most people. Like, can you think of any actors really other than maybe like Ian McKellen, and he's in his like what 70s, 60s or 70s?
60s, yeah,
yeah,
late 60s.
I mean,
can you on for Sherlock Holmes?
I mean, can you think of any other actors who managed to do that? I mean,
the only like people that are alive, no.
Yeah.
Vincent Price, yes.
Yeah, Vincent Price. Yeah.
People that are alive, no. Yeah, they're all dead.
Yeah,
so I told my wife today. I said, if Ian McKellen goes, why don't we just kill ourselves?
That's the sad thing. It's like Vincent Price is dead, Christopher Lee is dead, Peter Cushing is dead, Donald Pleasance is dead.
John Carradine dead. David Carradine dead.
Yeah, it's the
everything went downhill since Bruce Lee died too. So
it's the silver age of horror. It's really that post 1931 generation of horror actors that they're all gone now. Like he was the last one really. Like I can't think of anyone else. I mean, there might be some bit part actors somewhere who were part of a lot of those films, but as far as big stars,
like, people that used to mingle with Corman, and like that you could consider pieces of a puzzle. Like I know Jack Nicholson, in the Little Shop of Horrors, The Raven, things like that. And that was nice. They got to act, and Sig Haig got to act with Lon Chaney, and Jack Nicholson got the chance to have Boris Karloff and things like that met these iconic people. But as far as themselves holding a candle, not really.
Yeah. Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, they were in a class above and beyond a lot of actors. I mean, it's no slight to other actors. It's just they're from a generation that's really gone. It's really dead, and it's really, really fucking sad.
In the willow meads of Tassarinan, I walked in the spring. Ah, the sight and the smell of the spring in Tassarion. And I said that was good. I wandered in summer in the elm woods of Ossiriand. Ah, the light and the music in the summer by the 7 rivers of Ossir. And I thought that was best. To the beaches of Neldoreth I came in the autumn. Ah, the gold and the red, and the sighing of leaves in the autumn in Tauern and Eldor. It was more than my desire. To the pine trees upon the highland of Dorthonion I climbed in the winter. Ah, the wind and the whiteness and the black branches of winter upon Orod Nathon. My voice went up and sang in the sky, and now those lands lie under the wave, and I walk in Ambarona, in Taure Morna, in Aldalone. In my own land, in the country of Fangorn, where the roads are long, and the years lie thicker than the leaves, in
I don't know. I think I want to transition into just basically what are your favorite roles of Christopher Lee? Like, what are the ones that really stand out to you?
Well, I like all the Dracula stuff. Unfortunately, many people just know him as the Dracula guy.
Yeah.
I love what he did in Howling 2. That I love. A film that I never really got into too much just because of lack of watching is The Wicker Man, but I still think he did a great job in that one from what I remember.
Mm-hmm.
He, like we said about Gremlins, that was fun. But I like when he plays in Nothing But the Night. He plays a little bit of an offbeat character where he's trying to figure out what the hell's going on the whole time. He's not the bad guy. It's really nice to see Christopher Lee in the opposite side of the role.
If you're a follower of Christopher Lee, it's kind of weird. Like, it's almost jarring to see him as the good guy in a film. Take a film like, I know it as Raw Meat. I think it's also known as like Deathline or something like that, where it's him and Donald Pleasance. And it's a British film where in the actual British Underground or whatever, the subway train, there's cannibal. There's like the last of a family of cannibals killing people and shit. Christopher Lee plays this MI5 agent, and he's basically, you know, like he's not necessarily a bad guy, but he's sort of like opposed to Donald Pleasant as a like police detective and shit. Really good role, really good film. I actually like him in Fu Manchu as Fu Manchu.
The Revenge of Fu Manchu.
Like he did several films for the Fu Manchu thing. Some people, you know, the modern audience today might go, "That's really offensive. That's really racist."
Yeah, that's racist.
A further warning to humanity. If the governments of all the nations do not accept my terms, in 4 days' time, I will bring desolation to mankind.
The Castle of Fu Manchu.
The signal isn't getting through. Strengthen the signal. No! Do as I say! Strengthen it!
In his eternal fight to dominate the world, Fu Manchu has discovered a new and horrifying weapon with which to demonstrate his power.
Fu Manchu is only interested in destruction. But what can we do to save Professor Heracles? I believe it's a question of saving the world, Dr. Kessler.
Although the greatest, Nayland Smith is not the only enemy of Fu Manchu.
She fights like a man.
She is Omar Pasha's favorite. We must kill her.
Take her away.
For the most devilish part of his plan, the many arms of Fu Manchu reach out across continents to bring unwilling assistance to the castle of Fu Manchu.
Bring forth the 2 prisoners.
Christopher Lee as the dreaded Dr. Fu Manchu. Sai Chin as his sadistic daughter, Lin Tan. Marie Percy as his most vulnerable victim. Richard Green as Nayland Smith, his arch-enemy from Scotland Yard.
I need Heracles to complete my plans. I need him alive, conscious, coherent. Therefore, you will operate. If I refuse, then Dr. Ingrid Koch will die an extremely painful death. Flood the tunnels! If disaster is to be avoided, I shall insist on complete cooperation. I shall give no further warning. In 14 days from now, I shall strike.
Yeah, I also just got done watching Murdered by Death, where Peter Sellers plays Little Wang.
Yeah, I mean, people watch that. Like, I would direct those people to watch the fucking early fucking like Charlie Chan movies and stuff. You want to see really racist shit? See that shit.
And he also played Rasputin too, which was really great.
Exactly, Rasputin. That was one of his best roles. That was so fucking good, the way he did that. Just with the Fu Manchu, like, it goes back to what I was talking about, where he looked different. He did not quite fit the stereotypical British actor and leading man role. They just, they did a little makeup job on him, make his eyes more squinty and stuff. But in the day, he had this weird look. He kind of fit in that sort of Fu Manchu role,
It was more believable to them because they didn't know anything else.
Yeah.
Oh, and I do like him in The Devil Rides Out. And it's kind of interesting to know that it was like when he, just like Vincent Price, like everybody, when they started doing this, it was like the late to mid 50s when these people started making films that were blowing the idea of what films were off the map. These were not normal everyday films. These were actual horror films where, you know, it's something that you need to have an appreciation of the film industry back then to understand, to get into it. You know what I mean? My kids watch Horror of Dracula about once a week. So they like it. They think it's good. And it's nice to see them appreciating something like that.
Yeah, well, those are great films. I mean, it's not one of those things where you look at, like, say, fucking Blob or something like that, where it's like, oh, everyone says this is a great film, but you watch it and it's like, it's boring as fuck. I personally, I this might be controversial. I think the original Blob is shit. I think it's not an interesting movie.
Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, people. Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. Steve McQueen trying to act like a 12-year-old. It's great.
Steve McQueen's first big role, and he was like 30 at that point.
30 playing an 18-year-old or 17-year-old. Yeah.
There's great effects in that film, but other than that, the film's not that good. It's really not that good. Christopher Lee is fucking gold no matter what he does. As far as
the one thing I noticed too is the older he got, the more he had the ability to show more like grandfather warmth in his characters too. He had that ability that he worked with. Just looking at some of his older releases or newer releases that I might not have known about, but I saw, like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. He plays a great kind of lost father in that one.
Yeah.
So I thought that was actually good, and I did get a kick when my kids were watching it, and I heard his voice as the Jabberwocky from Alice in Wonderland. I didn't see. Apparently he was in Dark Shadows. I didn't actually watch that film.
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet either.
Played a bit part in Burke and Hare. The Burke and Hare wasn't as good as I thought it would be, but it wasn't a bad movie, and he played a pretty fun. He was the old guy they were suffocating with a pillow. So
really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen
role in that.
That was the Simon Pegg.
Yeah, the Simon Pegg and Andrew Sykes. So,
I haven't seen that one yet. I saw the original Burke and Hare from like 1972, I think maybe. I haven't seen that one yet.
It's all right. It's not as good as I thought it would be, but it has its moments.
There was one in the last couple of years that was really regrettable. The Wicker Tree. Which was bad. It was bad. Done by the same director who did The Wicker Man, and it was supposed to be like some sort of like spiritual sequel to The Wicker Man. It was fucking terrible as shit, and I'm actually kind of embarrassed for Christopher Lee to have even starred in that one, even as in his bit part. When you consider The Wicker Man, which is actually kind of almost an atypical performance for him. Like it wasn't the more stoic, authoritarian performance for him. It was more sort of kind of flippant and comical almost. And I think The Wicker Man, the original, is a great fucking film. And
the remake is horrible.
The remake is horrible, but it's also kind of funny in a way.
Get away from the bike! Get away from the bike! The bees!
The bees! The bees!
The last film that I see he's noted for, the last two, I should say, is Angels in Notting Hill. Where he plays the boss, Mr. President. And Extraordinary Tales, he does a voice part for that. So those are actually the ending films that he plays. Mixed in with the girl from Nagasaki and the Lord of the Rings kind of films. So,
yeah, I actually look forward to seeing these ones. I'm actually going to click on Extraordinary Tales here and just see what the fuck that is.
There used to be a show in the 90s called Amazing Tales, I think they were called.
Animated anthology of 5 stories adapted from Edgar Allan Poe. Okay, I'm going to watch that.
That sounds right up my alley.
I'm going to fucking watch that. Oh, shit. If you actually click on that, look who they got for the voices. Sounds like it's like a...
Roger Corman, Christopher Lee.
Sounds like it's like a... Edgar Allan Poe stories, narrated or whatever. Fuck yeah. Roger Corman, Guillermo del Toro, Christopher Lee, Julian Sands. Fuck yeah, I'll fucking watch that.
Julian Sands from the Witchboard or whatever it was.
Warlock. Yeah, Warlock. Yeah, Julian Sands. Yeah. Sweet. Yeah, I'll fucking watch that.
And the Medallion with Jackie Chan.
Angels in Notting Hill. I gotta see what the fuck this is. Miracles happen in your mind. Angels and Man and Angel and Man. Death calls of an experienced young angel. I'll watch it. I'll watch it, but
Prophecy 2, basically.
Doesn't sound very good.
Watch the Prophecy 2 and think Christopher Walken is Christopher Lee, and you'll be happier, probably.
Yeah.
Other than that, I mean, unfortunately, I don't know how to describe it other than a giant oak tree that's been slowly hacked away over time. The more and more of these guys fall. Christopher Lee was the last swing. That class is gone now. I mean, we have a history of a lineage of film history and things for us to appreciate and grow and get inspiration from. But the actual body of the actors literally are gone now.
It's possible that we might see some actors that eventually will be as great as he is. Honestly, I'm not all that optimistic about it. But yeah, he really is the last of an era, and it's really, really fucking sad that he's gone. But at the same time that he was 93, what the fuck more could you ask for from the guy?
Well, he also played with Man of War, so Rhapsody of Fire and Man of War, and you can't get more epic than Man of War and Christopher Lee put together.
Yeah, and this is an actor who spoke to several generations. Like, he was not just some old time actor from the 50s that everyone forgot about or shit. Like, he was a guy who was relevant up till his death. Like I said on my little Facebook message about him, he's a fucking play button away on my DVDs. Like,
yeah, you can always see him.
Yeah, you can always see the guy, and I think everyone's going to see him for years to come. Rest in peace, dude. Gonna miss him, but I'm glad I have so many movies of his, and
there's so many more out there we didn't get yet.
Exactly, yeah. Thanks very much, Paul, for talking with me about this, and so thanks very much, guys, for listening. Paul, you want to tell the listeners where they can find you?
Yep, you can go on YouTube, one word, PA Brew News, for beer reviews, and now and again little horror updates. And on YouTube, you can go to Funeral Death 666 for some underground black metal from Pennsylvania, all that good stuff. Other than that, that's it.
All right, great. All right, thanks, guys, for listening, and we'll talk to you again later here. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to They Must Be Destroyed on Sight. For our other episodes, links to Daniel, Paul, and Lee's other stuff, and links to some great podcasts of similar interest, visit us at tmbdos.podbean.com. There you can leave us comments on the site or directly email us. We listen and respond to everything. Thank you. Drive through.